My blood turned to ice as I stared at the laboratory report in my trembling hands. The words blurred through my tears, but the devastating truth was crystal clear. Pennyroyal extract detected in significant concentrations. Potential reproductive toxicity. Recommend immediate medical consultation. 8 months of family dinners. 8 months of Cordelia's special family recipe casserole that she insisted I eat every single time. 8 months of feeling increasingly unwell after each gathering, dismissing my symptoms as wedding stress or work pressure. My world came crashing down as the horrible realization hit me like a freight train. Those loving family traditions, those bonding moments over her grandmother's secret recipe, those warm smiles as she watched me clean my plate, it had all been systematic poisoning. She had been deliberately destroying my fertility, one dinner at a time, to protect her precious son's inheritance from future grandchildren. She had no idea I'd discovered her twisted plan. Hey friend, before we continue, please subscribe for your daily dose of gripping revenge stories. It's 1 second for you, but a big deal for me. 8 months ago, I thought I'd married into the perfect family when I became Isadora Blackthorne's daughter-in-law. At 28, I was blissfully happy in my new marriage to Jasper Blackthorne, a successful architect who seemed too good to be true. He was kind, intelligent, devastatingly handsome, and came from what appeared to be a close-knit, loving family. Cordelia Blackthorne, Jasper's mother, had welcomed me with open arms from the moment we announced our engagement. At 62, she was an elegant, sophisticated woman who carried herself with the grace of someone born into wealth and privilege. The Blackthorne family had built their fortune in real estate development over 3 generations, and their estate in the prestigious Rosewood Hills neighborhood was a testament to their success. "Zara, darling," Cordelia had said during our first family dinner, her voice warm and cultured, "I'm so thrilled that Jasper has found someone as wonderful as you. You're exactly what this family needs, young, vibrant, and clearly devoted to my son." The Blackthorne mansion was everything you'd expect from old money. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of distinguished ancestors, and furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. But despite the intimidating wealth, Cordelia had made me feel welcome and accepted in a way that meant everything to a girl from a middle-class family in suburban Atlanta. My own parents, both teachers who'd worked hard to provide a comfortable life for me and my siblings, had been somewhat overwhelmed by the Blackthorne wealth. But they'd been genuinely happy to see me marry into such a successful family, especially since Jasper clearly adored me and treated me like a queen. "You've really landed on your feet, sweetheart," my mother had whispered to me during the wedding reception, tears of joy in her eyes. "Jasper's a good man, and his family seems to really care about you." I worked as a biomedical researcher at Emory University, a career I'd built through years of rigorous study and dedication. My background in toxicology and pharmacology had always made me detail-oriented about health and safety, but ironically, it hadn't prepared me to recognize that I was being systematically poisoned by someone I trusted. The early months of marriage had been blissful. Jasper and I lived in a beautiful townhouse that his family had purchased as a wedding gift, and we were already talking about starting a family. I'd always dreamed of having children, and Jasper shared my enthusiasm for building a large, loving family. "I want at least 3 kids," he told me during one of our late-night conversations about the future. I was an only child, and it was lonely sometimes. "I want our house to be full of laughter and chaos and little feet running around." Those conversations about our future children always made my heart sing. I could picture our life together, successful careers, beautiful home, and the family we'd create together. It seemed like everything was falling perfectly into place. The tradition began during our 3rd family dinner as a married couple. Cordelia had prepared an elaborate meal, but when it came time for the main course, she presented me with a special individual casserole that looked different from what everyone else was eating. "This is my grandmother's special recipe," she'd announced with obvious pride, setting the elegant ceramic dish in front of me. "It's been passed down through the Blackthorne women for 4 generations. I only make it for the most special occasions and the most important family members." The casserole looked delicious, layers of what appeared to be seasoned ground lamb, vegetables, and herbs, topped with a golden pastry crust. The aroma was complex and appealing, with hints of rosemary, thyme, and other herbs I couldn't immediately identify. "Oh, how thoughtful!" I'd exclaimed, genuinely touched by what seemed like a gesture of acceptance and inclusion. "I'm honored that you'd share such a special family tradition with me." Cordelia's eyes had lit up with apparent pleasure. "I've been waiting for the right person to pass this recipe to," she'd said. "Jasper's father, God rest his soul, absolutely loved when I made this dish. And now I want to make it for you, because you're the daughter I never had." The emotional significance of the moment hadn't been lost on me. As someone who'd always wanted to be part of a large traditional family, receiving this kind of acceptance from my mother-in-law felt incredibly meaningful. I'd eaten every bite of the casserole with genuine appreciation, telling Cordelia how delicious it was and asking about the family history behind the recipe. "The recipe has been in our family since my great-grandmother brought it from England," Cordelia had explained, her voice taking on a nostalgic tone. "Each generation has guarded the secret ingredients carefully. It's more than just food, it's a connection to our heritage and our values." Jasper had beamed with happiness seeing his mother and wife bonding over family traditions. "Mom's been talking about sharing that recipe with the right person for years," he'd said. "She's never even told me all the ingredients." From that dinner forward, every family gathering included Cordelia preparing the special casserole just for me. It became our tradition. She would spend extra time in the kitchen creating this elaborate dish while preparing simpler fare for everyone else. The other family members would joke about my special treatment, but always in a warm, inclusive way that made me feel cherished rather than singled out. "Cordelia really has taken to you," Jasper's Aunt Beatrice would say with a smile. "I've never seen her make such an effort for anyone. You're truly part of the family now." About 3 months into this tradition, I began experiencing health issues that I initially attributed to the stress of adjusting to married life and my demanding career. After each family dinner, I would feel nauseated and develop severe abdominal cramping that would last for days. I'd also experience irregular menstrual cycles, fatigue that seemed disproportionate to my activity level, and occasional dizziness that would come and go without apparent cause. At first, I dismissed these symptoms as coincidental. I was working long hours on a major research project, planning a home renovation with Jasper, and adjusting to the social demands of being part of a prominent family. It seemed natural that my body might be reacting to increased stress and changes in routine. "You're probably just doing too much," Jasper would say when I mentioned feeling unwell. "Maybe you should take some time off work, or we could postpone some of the house projects." But as the months passed, I began to notice a clear pattern. I would feel perfectly fine before family dinners, enjoy the evening with Cordelia's special casserole, and then invariably feel sick for several days afterward. The symptoms were consistent enough that I started mentally preparing for feeling unwell after each family gathering. More concerning was my growing difficulty with what should have been our easy transition to trying for a baby. Jasper and I had decided to start our family about 4 months after the wedding, but despite being young, healthy, and having no known fertility issues, I wasn't getting pregnant. My cycles had become increasingly irregular, and I was experiencing symptoms that seemed inconsistent with my previously excellent reproductive health. During this time, I also began noticing subtle changes in Cordelia's behavior around discussions of children and family planning. When Jasper and I would mention our hopes for starting a family, she would become noticeably tense and would quickly change the subject or find reasons to leave the room. "There's no rush for babies," she would say whenever the topic came up. "You two are so young, and there's so much you should experience together before taking on the responsibilities of parenthood. Travel, build your careers, enjoy your freedom while you have it." While her advice wasn't unreasonable, something about her tone and body language felt off. She seemed almost anxious when we discussed our family planning, which struck me as odd for someone who had always seemed excited about every other aspect of our marriage. I also noticed that Cordelia would become unusually insistent about me finishing every bite of her special casserole. If I seemed to be eating slowly or appeared full, she would hover nearby, encouraging me to clean my plate completely. "You need to keep your strength up," she would say, watching me intently. "This recipe has special nutrients that are particularly important for women your age. My grandmother always said it would help young wives stay healthy and strong." By the 6th month of marriage, my health concerns had escalated to the point where I decided to see my doctor for a comprehensive evaluation. Dr. Renata Volkov, my gynecologist, was puzzled by my symptoms and the changes in my reproductive health. "Your hormone levels are somewhat unusual," she told me after reviewing my test results. "There's nothing immediately dangerous, but some of your markers suggest possible exposure to substances that can affect reproductive function. Have you made any major changes to your diet, medications, or environment recently?" I'd mentioned the family dinners and Cordelia's special casserole, but at the time, it seemed absurd to suggest that my mother-in-law might be poisoning me. Dr. Volkov had recommended keeping a detailed food diary and monitoring my symptoms to see if we could identify any triggers. Around the same time, I began researching the Blackthorne family history and wealth in more detail. What I discovered both impressed and concerned me. The family's net worth was estimated at over $50 million, including real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and a family trust that had been carefully structured to preserve wealth across generations. More interesting was what I learned about the family's approach to inheritance and wealth preservation. Through public records and social media research, I discovered that Cordelia had been obsessive about protecting the family assets ever since her husband's death 15 years earlier. She'd fought several legal battles with distant relatives over inheritance rights, and had restructured the family trust multiple times to ensure maximum protection of the principal. I also learned that Jasper had dated seriously only once before me, a relationship that had lasted 2 years and had seemed headed toward marriage. According to mutual friends, the relationship had ended abruptly when the girlfriend, Natasha, had suddenly developed serious health problems that required her to move back to her home state for treatment. It was so strange, one of Jasper's college friends had told me at a party. Natasha was perfectly healthy, and then suddenly she was dealing with all these mysterious medical issues. She and Jasper were crazy about each other, but she couldn't handle the stress of being sick and trying to maintain a long-distance relationship. This information planted the first real seeds of suspicion in my mind. 2 young, healthy women in serious relationships with Jasper had both developed unexplained health problems. The coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. I decided to conduct a small experiment. At the next family dinner, I would find a way to avoid eating Cordelia's special casserole and see if my post-dinner symptoms improved. The challenge would be doing this without offending her or raising suspicions about my concerns. My attempt to avoid eating the casserole proved more difficult than anticipated. When I arrived at the family dinner claiming to have eaten a large late lunch and requesting just a small portion, Cordelia's reaction was immediate and intense. "Nonsense, darling," she'd said, her voice taking on a steel edge beneath the sweet tone. "You need proper nutrition, especially if you and Jasper are serious about starting a family soon. This recipe has been nourishing Blackthorne women for generations." She'd proceeded to serve me an even larger portion than usual, and then positioned herself where she could watch me eat throughout the meal. Every few minutes, she would make comments about how important it was for me to finish the entire dish. "My great-grandmother always said that the special ingredients only work if you consume the complete serving," Cordelia had explained, her eyes never leaving my plate. "It's about the balance of nutrients and the way they work together in your system." When I tried to claim I was too full to finish, she became visibly agitated. "Zara, I spent hours preparing this specifically for you," she'd said, her voice carrying a note of hurt that made me feel guilty for resisting. "It would mean so much to me to see you appreciate the tradition properly." The emotional manipulation was subtle but effective. Surrounded by family members who were all watching the interaction, I felt pressured to comply rather than create an uncomfortable scene. I'd ended up eating the entire casserole, and predictably, I'd spent the next 3 days feeling nauseated and weak. But the experience had confirmed my growing suspicions. Cordelia's insistence that I consume the entire dish, her visible anxiety when I tried to avoid it, and her oddly specific claims about the recipe's special ingredients, all suggested that there was something in that casserole that she needed me to ingest. Armed with growing certainty that something was seriously wrong, I decided to conduct a proper investigation. Using my scientific background and access to laboratory facilities at the university, I began planning to secretly collect samples of Cordelia's casserole for analysis. The next family dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday, giving me a week to prepare my strategy. I purchased a small sealed container that I could conceal in my purse, and I practiced methods for discreetly collecting food samples without being detected. I also began documenting my symptoms more systematically, creating a detailed log of how I felt before, during, and after each family dinner. The pattern was becoming undeniably clear. I would arrive feeling healthy and energetic, eat Cordelia's casserole, and then experience several days of nausea, cramping, irregular cycles, and fatigue. During that week, I also conducted research into substances that could cause the symptoms I was experiencing. My background in toxicology proved invaluable as I investigated compounds that could affect reproductive health, cause gastrointestinal distress, and be easily disguised in food. What I discovered was deeply disturbing. There were numerous plant-based substances, some readily available through herbal suppliers, that could systematically damage reproductive function if administered regularly over time. Pennyroyal, tansy, rue, and several other herbs had historically been used to prevent pregnancy and could cause the exact constellation of symptoms I was experiencing. More chilling was my research into the historical use of these substances. Throughout history, there had been documented cases of mothers-in-law, stepmothers, and other family members using herbal preparations to prevent unwanted pregnancies or eliminate potential heirs who might threaten inheritance rights. The following Sunday's family dinner required every ounce of my acting ability. I smiled, chatted warmly with family members, and expressed my usual gratitude when Cordelia presented me with her special casserole. But this time, I was prepared. Using a technique I'd perfected during my research career, I managed to collect several small samples of the casserole in my concealed container. I made sure to take samples from different areas of the dish to ensure I captured any substances that might be concentrated in specific layers or sections. "This is particularly delicious tonight," I told Cordelia, hoping my nervousness wasn't obvious. "The herb blend seems even more complex than usual." Cordelia's face had lit up with apparent pleasure. "I've been experimenting with some additional traditional ingredients," she'd replied. "Herbs that my great-grandmother mentioned in her journals, but that I'd never tried before. I think they really enhance the overall effect." The casual mention of additional traditional ingredients sent chills down my spine. If my suspicions were correct, Cordelia was essentially admitting to increasing the dosage of whatever toxic substances she was using. The next morning, I submitted my samples to the university's toxicology laboratory under the pretense of researching historical food preservation methods. I also scheduled a comprehensive medical examination with Dr. Volkov to establish a baseline for my current health status. The wait for results was agonizing. For 3 days, I went through the motions of normal life while consumed with anxiety about what the laboratory analysis might reveal. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that my suspicions were the product of an overactive imagination and too much stress. But a larger part of me already knew that my worst fears were about to be confirmed. When the laboratory results arrived, they exceeded my worst nightmares. The casserole samples contained not one, but multiple toxic substances known to cause reproductive damage. Pennyroyal extract in concentrations sufficient to disrupt ovarian function and prevent implantation. Tansy oil at levels that could cause hormonal irregularities and menstrual dysfunction. Rue extract in quantities known to have abortifacient properties and cause lasting reproductive harm. But the most damning evidence was the presence of blue cohosh and cotton root bark, substances that were difficult to obtain and had no culinary purpose whatsoever. These were not ingredients that could be accidentally included in any legitimate recipe. They were specifically chosen for their ability to prevent pregnancy and cause reproductive system damage. The laboratory report included a note from the technician: "These substances in combination represent a systematic approach to reproductive toxicity. Prolonged exposure could result in permanent fertility damage. Recommend immediate medical evaluation and cessation of exposure." I sat in my car outside the university laboratory, holding the report with shaking hands, as the full scope of Cordelia's betrayal hit me. This wasn't just about preventing grandchildren, this was about permanently destroying my ability to have children at all. She wasn't just trying to delay my pregnancy, she was trying to ensure it could never happen. The medical follow-up with Dr. Volkov confirmed my worst fears. Blood tests showed elevated liver enzymes consistent with chronic low-level poisoning, and my reproductive hormone levels indicated significant stress on my ovarian function. "Zara, these results are very concerning," Dr. Volkov had said, her professional composure barely concealing her alarm. "You've been exposed to substances that are specifically designed to disrupt reproductive function. We need to identify the source immediately and begin treatment to prevent permanent damage." When I'd shown her the laboratory report from the casserole samples, her face had gone pale. "This is deliberate poisoning," she'd said bluntly. "Someone has been systematically administering reproductive toxins to you. We need to involve law enforcement immediately." With Dr. Volkov's help, I contacted Detective Lydia Marsh from the Atlanta Police Department's Special Victims Unit. Detective Marsh specialized in cases involving domestic abuse and family violence, and she immediately recognized the severity of what we were dealing with. "This isn't just assault," Detective Marsh had explained during our first meeting. "This is attempted murder with a biological weapon. The premeditation and sophistication involved make this one of the most serious cases I've encountered." Working with Detective Marsh, I began building a comprehensive case against Cordelia. We needed to prove not just that she was poisoning me, but that she was doing so intentionally and with full knowledge of the consequences. Our investigation quickly revealed the scope of Cordelia's planning and preparation. Financial records showed that she had been purchasing large quantities of herbal supplements and traditional medicine ingredients from multiple suppliers over the past year. She'd been careful to spread her purchases across different vendors to avoid detection, but the pattern was clear once we knew what to look for. More damning was the discovery of research materials in Cordelia's private study. Hidden in a locked filing cabinet, we found printed articles about historical methods of birth control and fertility prevention, detailed notes about herbal preparations and their effects on reproductive health, and even calculations showing optimal dosage levels for the substances she'd been using. But the most chilling discovery was a journal that Cordelia had been keeping throughout the entire process. Written in her elegant handwriting, it documented her systematic campaign to destroy my fertility. Month 1. Began administration of preparation. Z. Shows no suspicion. Dosage appears well tolerated. Month 3. Increasing frequency and concentration. Z. Reporting minor symptoms but attributing to stress. Excellent. Month 5. Z and J. Discussing family planning more frequently. Must accelerate timeline and increase effectiveness. Month 7. Added blue cohosh and cotton root bark to preparation. This should ensure permanent results within 2 to 3 additional months. The journal also revealed Cordelia's financial motivation with crystal clarity. She'd been consulting with estate planning attorneys about methods to protect the family inheritance from potential dilution through future generations. She'd even obtained legal opinions about whether grandchildren born after certain dates could be excluded from trust distributions. Most disturbing of all, we found evidence that I wasn't Cordelia's first victim. Hidden in the same filing cabinet were medical records and newspaper clippings related to Natasha, Jasper's former girlfriend. The records showed that Natasha had experienced the exact same constellation of symptoms I was dealing with, and had ultimately been diagnosed with unexplained fertility issues that had required extensive treatment. Detective Marsh and I developed a careful strategy for exposing Cordelia's crimes while ensuring we could gather enough evidence for a successful prosecution. We needed to get her to admit to the poisoning while documenting her motives and methods. The plan involved me wearing a concealed recording device during what would appear to be a normal family dinner. I would confront Cordelia directly about my health problems and see how she responded to increasingly specific questions about the casserole ingredients. The key is to start general and get more specific, Detective Marsh had explained. Let her think she's still in control of the situation. People like Cordelia often can't resist explaining how clever they've been, especially when they think they're safe. I also decided that this confrontation needed to happen in front of Jasper and other family members. They deserved to know the truth about Cordelia's actions, and I wanted witnesses to her confession. The most difficult part was preparing Jasper for what was coming. 3 days before the planned confrontation, I sat him down and explained everything I'd discovered. His initial reaction was complete disbelief. Zara, I know my mother can be controlling, but poisoning? That's insane. There has to be some other explanation. When I showed him the laboratory reports, the medical evidence, and excerpts from Cordelia's journal, his face had gone through a series of emotions: shock, denial, rage, and finally a kind of broken devastation. How could she do this? He'd whispered, holding the journal pages with trembling hands. How could she hurt you like this? How could she risk your life for money? She doesn't see it as risking my life, I'd explained. In her mind, she's protecting your future and the family's legacy. She's convinced herself that preventing us from having children is a noble sacrifice for the greater good of preserving the Blackthorn wealth. Jasper's support was crucial for what came next. He agreed to attend the family dinner and help create the right conditions for the confrontation, though I could see how much it was costing him emotionally to accept that his mother was capable of such calculated cruelty. The last Sunday dinner at the Blackthorn mansion was surreal in its normalcy. Cordelia greeted me with her usual warmth, asked about my work, and complimented my dress. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, apparently completely unaware that I knew the truth about her systematic poisoning campaign. I've prepared something extra special for you tonight, she'd announced as we gathered in the dining room. I found some additional traditional ingredients mentioned in my great-grandmother's original notes. This will be the most authentic version of the family recipe you've ever tasted. The casual way she mentioned adding more toxic substances while smiling lovingly at me was almost surreal. She was essentially promising to escalate her poisoning efforts while maintaining the facade of a caring mother-in-law sharing family traditions. As usual, she presented me with an individual casserole while serving simpler dishes to everyone else. But this time, I was prepared. The concealed recording device was capturing every word, and Detective Marsh was positioned outside with backup units ready to respond. "Cordelia," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I need to ask you something important. I've been having health problems for months now, and my doctor thinks they might be related to something in my diet. Could you tell me exactly what ingredients are in this family recipe?" For just a moment, Cordelia's mask slipped, and I saw a flash of calculation in her eyes. Then the warm smile returned. "Oh darling, it's just traditional herbs and spices. Nothing that could possibly cause health problems. My family has been eating this recipe for generations without any issues." "But I've been having very specific symptoms," I pressed. "Problems with my reproductive health, nausea, irregular cycles. My doctor says these symptoms are consistent with exposure to certain herbal substances." This time, Cordelia's pause was longer, and her smile became more strained. "I'm sure it's just stress, dear. Young wives often experience these kinds of issues when they're adjusting to married life." Jasper, who had been silent up to this point, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, Zara's doctor thinks she's been exposed to reproductive toxins. We need to know exactly what's in that casserole." The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. Other family members began paying closer attention, sensing the tension that was building between us and Cordelia. "This is ridiculous," Cordelia said, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "I've been making this recipe with love and care, treating Zara like my own daughter, and now you're accusing me of, what exactly?" I reached into my purse and pulled out the laboratory report. "I had samples of your casserole analyzed by a professional toxicology lab," I said, watching her face carefully. "Would you like to know what they found?" The change in Cordelia's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. The warm, loving mother-in-law facade cracked completely, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You little spy," she hissed, all pretense of affection gone. "You ungrateful, suspicious little spy. How dare you have my family recipes analyzed like some kind of criminal evidence?" "Because they are criminal evidence," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "Pennyroyal extract, tansy oil, rue, blue cohosh, cotton root bark, do any of those sound like traditional cooking ingredients to you?" The other family members gasped as I read the list of toxic substances. Jasper's Aunt Beatrice actually put her hand over her mouth in shock. "Those are reproductive toxins," I continued. "Substances specifically chosen to prevent pregnancy and cause permanent fertility damage. You've been systematically poisoning me for 8 months, trying to ensure I could never give Jasper children." Cordelia's mask was completely gone now, replaced by a kind of desperate fury. "You don't understand," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You don't understand what's at stake. This family has worked for generations to build what we have. I won't let it be destroyed by a parade of children who will drain our resources and dilute our legacy." "So you decided to destroy my health instead?" I shot back. "To permanently damage my reproductive system without my knowledge or consent?" "I was protecting Jasper." Cordelia screamed, abandoning all attempts at self-control. "I was protecting his future. Do you have any idea how much money children cost? How much of the family wealth would be lost to supporting endless generations of offspring?" Jasper stood up abruptly, his face white with shock and anger. "Mom, what have you done? How could you hurt Zara like this? How could you make that choice for us?" "I made the choice that you were too naive to make for yourself," Cordelia replied, her voice cold and imperious. "You're thinking with your emotions instead of your brain. I was thinking about the family's long-term survival." Detective Marsh chose that moment to enter the dining room, her badge clearly visible. "Cordelia Blackthorne, you're under arrest for attempted murder, assault with a dangerous weapon, and conspiracy to commit bodily harm." The look of shock on Cordelia's face as she realized the scope of her legal jeopardy was almost comical. She'd been so focused on her inheritance preservation scheme that she'd apparently never considered that systematically poisoning someone might result in serious criminal charges. As Detective Marsh read Cordelia her rights, something in the older woman seemed to break. Perhaps it was the realization that her careful plans had been completely exposed, or perhaps it was the look of horror and betrayal on Jasper's face. Whatever the reason, she began talking compulsively, as if she needed to justify her actions to someone. "You think I'm some kind of monster," she said, looking around the room at her family members' horrified faces. "But everything I did was out of love. Love for Jasper, love for this family, love for the legacy we've built." "You poisoned my wife," Jasper said, his voice breaking. "You systematically destroyed her health for months. How is that love?" "Because children would have destroyed everything," Cordelia shouted. "Do you know what happens to family wealth when it gets divided among multiple generations? Do you know how quickly everything we've worked for disappears when it's spread across dozens of grandchildren and great-grandchildren?" She turned to me, her eyes blazing with a kind of fanatic intensity. "I researched everything carefully. The substances I used wouldn't kill you, they would just ensure that you couldn't reproduce. You could have had a long, healthy, happy life with Jasper without the burden and expense of children." "That wasn't your choice to make," I said, my voice shaking with controlled rage. "You had no right to make medical decisions about my body without my knowledge. You had no right to destroy my reproductive health for your financial planning." "I had every right to protect my family's future," Cordelia replied defiantly. "I've spent 15 years since my husband's death carefully managing and preserving our assets. I wasn't going to let some romantic notions about parenthood destroy everything I've accomplished." Detective Marsh stepped forward with handcuffs. "Ma'am, I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked into place, Cordelia looked directly at me. "You'll never prove this was anything other than an accident. Herbal cooking has been part of this family for generations. Any competent lawyer will be able to create reasonable doubt about my intentions." "Actually," Detective Marsh said with a slight smile, "we found your journal. The one where you documented the entire poisoning campaign, including dosage calculations and your plans to ensure permanent results. Your own handwriting is going to be our best evidence." The look of horror on Cordelia's face as she realized the scope of the evidence against her was deeply satisfying. She'd been so meticulous in documenting her crimes that she'd essentially created a complete confession that would make prosecution straightforward. The trial of Cordelia Blackthorne became a sensational case that dominated local news for months. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rachel Morrison, presented overwhelming evidence of premeditated systematic poisoning designed to cause permanent reproductive harm. The evidence included laboratory analysis of the toxic substances, my medical records showing the health damage, Cordelia's detailed journal documenting her poisoning campaign, her research into fertility-destroying herbs, and financial records showing her purchases of the toxic ingredients. Perhaps most damning was the discovery that Cordelia had also poisoned Natasha, Jasper's former girlfriend, using the same methods. When we tracked down Natasha and explained what we'd discovered, she agreed to testify about her own experience with mysterious health problems during family dinners at the Blackthorne mansion. "I always wondered why I got so sick whenever I ate at Jasper's family home," Natasha testified. "The symptoms were so specific and consistent that it seemed like more than coincidence. But I never imagined that his mother was deliberately poisoning me." The defense team, recognizing that the evidence against their client was overwhelming, attempted to argue that Cordelia was mentally ill and therefore not fully responsible for her actions. They brought in psychiatrists who testified about obsessive-compulsive personality disorder and claimed that Cordelia's fixation on protecting family wealth had made her unable to understand the consequences of her actions. The prosecution countered with evidence of Cordelia's methodical planning, her sophisticated research into toxic substances, and her ability to maintain normal social relationships while conducting her poisoning campaign. They argued that far from being mentally incompetent, Cordelia was one of the most calculating and intelligent criminals they'd ever prosecuted. The defendants' crimes weren't the result of mental illness, D.A. Morrison argued in her closing statement. They were the result of pure selfishness, a deliberate choice to value money over human life, to see her daughter-in-law as nothing more than a threat to be eliminated. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: attempted murder in the first degree, assault with a dangerous weapon, conspiracy to commit bodily harm, and criminal endangerment. Cordelia was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 15 years. The medical treatment for the poisoning damage took nearly a year, but Dr. Volkov was optimistic about my prospects for full recovery. "You're young and healthy, and we caught this before the damage became permanent," she'd explained. "With proper treatment and time, Your reproductive system should return to normal function. The treatment involved chelation therapy to remove residual toxins from my system, hormone therapy to restore normal reproductive function, and careful monitoring to ensure that the damage was reversing rather than progressing. Jasper was incredibly supportive throughout the recovery process, though I could see how much guilt he carried about his mother's actions. "I should have seen the signs," he would say repeatedly. "I should have questioned why she was so insistent about you eating that specific dish. I should have protected you better." "You couldn't have known," I would remind him. "Your mother spent decades perfecting her ability to manipulate and deceive. Even trained professionals were fooled by her act. The important thing is that you chose to support me when the truth came out." Our marriage actually grew stronger through the crisis. The experience of surviving such a calculated betrayal together created a bond between us that felt unbreakable. We'd faced the worst kind of family betrayal and emerged united, which gave us confidence that we could handle any future challenges together. The broader Blackthorne family struggled more with the aftermath. Many relatives had difficulty accepting that Cordelia was capable of such systematic cruelty, and some initially blamed me for destroying the family by exposing her crimes. Cordelia devoted her entire life to protecting this family, Jasper's uncle Theodore had argued during a particularly tense family meeting. "She made mistakes, but her intentions were good. Did you really need to send her to prison?" "She systematically poisoned me for 8 months, I'd replied, my voice steady despite my anger. "She was planning to permanently destroy my ability to have children to protect money that doesn't even belong to her. These weren't mistakes, they were calculated crimes." Over time, most family members came to understand the severity of what Cordelia had done. The discovery of her detailed journal and research materials made it impossible to characterize her actions as anything other than premeditated attempted murder. One of the unexpected consequences of Cordelia's conviction was the complete restructuring of the Blackthorne family finances. With the family matriarch in prison and her financial management methods thoroughly discredited, the entire estate required professional oversight and legal reorganization. Jasper, as the primary heir, made the decision to liquidate many of the family's more complex investments and establish a more transparent financial structure. "I don't want our wealth to be managed through the kind of obsessive control that drove my mother to commit crimes," he'd explained to the family lawyers. The legal costs of Cordelia's defense and the civil lawsuits that followed her conviction also significantly depleted the family resources. By the time all the legal proceedings were concluded, the Blackthorne inheritance was worth perhaps half of its original value. Ironically, Cordelia's crimes had achieved the exact opposite of what she'd intended. Instead of preserving family wealth for future generations, her actions had resulted in massive financial losses and legal expenses that would affect the family for decades. "She destroyed everything she was trying to protect," Jasper observed one evening as we reviewed the financial damage. "If she just accepted that we wanted children and supported our family planning, the inheritance would have remained intact. Her attempts to preserve it ended up destroying it." We also discovered that Cordelia had been systematically stealing from the family trust for years to fund her poisoning activities and other personal expenses. The herbs and supplements she'd purchased were just the tip of the iceberg. She'd also been paying for private investigators to research my background, legal consultations about inheritance law, and even attempts to bribe medical professionals to misdiagnose my symptoms. 18 months after the poisoning was discovered, Dr. Volkov confirmed what we'd been hoping for: my reproductive system had recovered sufficiently for us to safely try for a family. "Your hormone levels are back to normal, and all signs of toxic exposure have been eliminated," she told us with a smile. "There's no medical reason you can't have a healthy pregnancy." The news that I was pregnant came exactly 2 years after our wedding, almost to the day that Cordelia had first served me her special family recipe. The irony wasn't lost on us that despite all her calculations and systematic poisoning, her efforts to prevent grandchildren had ultimately failed. "She's probably furious in prison," Jasper had said when we got the positive pregnancy test. "All that planning and research and criminal activity, and we're having a baby anyway." The pregnancy proceeded normally, with no lasting effects from the poisoning. Our daughter, Luna Rosemary Blackthorne, was born healthy and beautiful after an uncomplicated delivery. Holding her for the first time, knowing that she existed despite Cordelia's determined efforts to prevent her, felt like the ultimate victory. "She tried to steal our future," I whispered to Jasper as we looked at our newborn daughter. "But we built it anyway, stronger and more precious because of what we survived together." Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the aftermath was Cordelia's continued attempts to contact us from prison. Despite restraining orders and explicit instructions that we wanted no communication, she managed to send letters through other inmates and their families. The letters revealed that even after conviction and imprisonment, Cordelia remained convinced that her actions had been justified and necessary. She continued to believe that she'd been protecting the family's future, and she seemed genuinely puzzled by our overreaction to her poisoning campaign. "My darling Jasper," one letter read, "I hope you've had time to reflect on everything that happened and understand that my actions came from a place of love. I was trying to protect your future and ensure that you'd have the resources to live the life you deserve. Perhaps when emotions have calmed, we can have a rational discussion about the family's financial planning." The letters made it clear that Cordelia had learned nothing from her conviction and imprisonment. She remained obsessed with controlling the family's wealth and inheritance, and she continued to view my desire for children as a threat to be eliminated rather than a natural part of family life. "She still doesn't understand that what she did was wrong," Jasper observed after reading one particularly delusional letter. "In her mind, she's the victim of an unfair legal system rather than a criminal who systematically poisoned an innocent person." We eventually had to involve law enforcement to stop the communications, as they were becoming increasingly manipulative and emotionally disturbing. The prison officials instituted special restrictions on Cordelia's correspondence privileges, but her determination to maintain control over the family remained undiminished. One of the most healing aspects of our recovery was creating new family traditions that weren't tainted by Cordelia's manipulation and control. We established our own holiday celebrations, dinner traditions, and family rituals that reflected our values rather than her obsessions. Our Sunday family dinners became celebrations of openness and honesty rather than opportunities for hidden agendas. We invited friends and chosen family members to join us, creating the kind of warm, inclusive atmosphere that we wanted Luna to grow up experiencing. "Food should bring people together, not be used as a weapon," I told Jasper as we planned our first Thanksgiving without any involvement from the Blackthorn family traditions. "Every meal in our home should be about love and nourishment, never about control or manipulation." We also established a college fund for Luna that was completely separate from any Blackthorn family assets. "I want her to have opportunities and security," Jasper explained, "but I want it to come from our own work and planning, not from wealth that's been tainted by criminal activity." The process of building new traditions and separating ourselves from the toxic aspects of the Blackthorn legacy was challenging but ultimately liberating. We were creating the kind of family environment that we wanted our daughter to inherit, one based on trust, honesty, and genuine care rather than manipulation and control. The experience of being systematically poisoned also had a profound impact on my career as a biomedical researcher. I became passionate about studying the medical and legal aspects of domestic poisoning, contributing to research that could help other victims identify and prove similar crimes. Working with Dr. Volkov and several toxicologists, I published papers on the detection of systematic reproductive poisoning and the long-term health effects of chronic exposure to fertility-destroying substances. The research helped establish better protocols for identifying and treating victims of this type of abuse. "Your case has become a landmark in the field," Dr. Volkov told me during one of our follow-up appointments. "The documentation of the poisoning, the legal proceedings, and your recovery process have provided invaluable data for helping future victims." I also began consulting with law enforcement agencies on cases involving suspected poisoning, particularly in domestic settings where the crimes might be disguised as caring behavior. The skills I developed in detecting and documenting Cordelia's crimes proved valuable in helping other investigators build cases against similar perpetrators. "You've turned your trauma into a tool for helping others," Detective Marsh observed during one of our collaborations. "That takes incredible strength and dedication." Over the years following Cordelia's conviction, many of the extended Blackthorn family members gradually came to terms with what had happened and rebuilt their relationships with us. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but ultimately healing for everyone involved. Jasper's Aunt Beatrice, who had initially struggled to accept Cordelia's guilt, eventually became one of our strongest supporters. "I was so invested in seeing Cordelia as the family's protector," she admitted during a family gathering when Luna was 2 years old. "It was easier to blame you for disrupting our family than to accept that our family was built on lies and manipulation." The family's collective acknowledgement of Cordelia's crimes and their impact helped create space for genuine healing and reconciliation. We were able to maintain relationships with relatives who were willing to acknowledge the truth and support our family's recovery. However, Some family members remained unable or unwilling to fully accept what had happened. A few relatives continued to maintain contact with Cordelia in prison and to advocate for her early release, which necessitated maintaining some distance from those relationships. "We can't control how other people process the situation," Jasper observed. "But we can control how we respond to it. We'll maintain relationships with family members who support our healing, and we'll protect our family from those who don't." As Luna grew from an infant into a curious, energetic toddler, she became a living symbol of our triumph over Cordelia's attempts to control our family's future. Every milestone she reached, her first smile, her first steps, her first words, felt like another victory against the woman who had tried to prevent her existence. "Mama, why do we have lots of pictures of Daddy's family but not his mommy?" Luna asked one day when she was 3 years old, looking through photo albums with us. "Daddy's mommy made some very bad choices that hurt people," I explained carefully. "She's not able to be part of our family anymore because she didn't know how to love people in safe and healthy ways." We'd agreed to be honest with Luna about her paternal grandmother's crimes in age-appropriate ways, ensuring that she understood the family history without being traumatized by details she wasn't ready to process. "Will she ever be able to visit us?" Luna asked with the innocent curiosity of a young child. "No, sweetheart," Jasper replied gently. "She has to stay in a special place where people go when they've hurt others. But you have lots of other family members who love you very much and will always take care of you." Luna's presence in our lives also served as a constant reminder of what we were fighting to protect. Every decision we made about family traditions, financial planning, and relationship boundaries was informed by our commitment to providing her with the kind of safe, honest family environment that we'd had to fight to create. The case of Cordelia Blackthorne's systematic poisoning had impacts far beyond our immediate family. The legal precedent established by her conviction influenced how similar cases were prosecuted in other jurisdictions, and the medical documentation of the poisoning effects contributed to better diagnostic protocols for identifying reproductive toxicity. Several other women came forward after the trial to report similar experiences with mysterious health problems during relationships with wealthy families. While most of these cases couldn't be definitively proven, the increased awareness of domestic poisoning as a form of abuse helped law enforcement and medical professionals take such complaints more seriously. Your willingness to pursue justice and go public with your story has probably saved other people from similar abuse, Detective Marsh told me during a conference where I spoke about domestic poisoning. Predators like Cordelia rely on their victims' silence and isolation. When survivors speak out, it breaks that pattern of secrecy. The case also influenced legislative efforts to strengthen penalties for domestic poisoning and to improve training for medical professionals in recognizing signs of systematic toxic exposure. Several states introduced new laws specifically addressing the use of supposed traditional remedies to harm family members without their knowledge. 5 years after discovering Cordelia's systematic poisoning, I often reflect on the lessons learned from surviving such a calculated betrayal. The experience taught me the importance of trusting my instincts about my own health, the value of scientific evidence in exposing hidden abuse, and the strength that comes from refusing to accept victimization. "I used to think that trusting people was a sign of weakness," I told a support group for abuse survivors. "But what I learned is that trusting the wrong people is just inexperience. Real strength comes from learning to distinguish between people who deserve trust and people who exploit it." The experience also reinforced my appreciation for the scientific method as a tool for uncovering truth and protecting vulnerable people. My background in toxicology had been crucial for detecting and proving the poisoning, but the principles of careful observation, hypothesis testing, and evidence gathering are applicable to many situations involving hidden abuse. Never ignore your body's signals, I often tell young women who seek my advice. If you're consistently feeling unwell in specific situations or around specific people, investigate those patterns seriously. Your health and safety are too important to dismiss as coincidence or stress. Today, our family life is everything that Cordelia tried to prevent. Luna is a healthy, happy 5-year-old who loves books, art, and asking endless questions about how everything works. We're expecting our second child, a son we plan to name Henry Theodore Blackthorne, and our marriage continues to grow stronger with each challenge we face together. Jasper has built a successful architecture practice that specializes in designing homes for families affected by trauma, incorporating safety features and therapeutic design principles that help survivors feel secure and empowered. His work has become his way of contributing to healing and protection for other families who face domestic abuse. I can't change what my mother did, he tells clients who are building new homes after escaping abusive situations. But I can help create spaces where you and your children can feel safe and build the future you deserve. I continue my research into domestic poisoning and toxicology, while also working as a consultant for law enforcement agencies investigating suspected abuse cases. The combination of scientific expertise and personal experience has made me effective at helping other victims identify and document systematic poisoning. We've also established the Luna Foundation, a non-profit organization that provides resources for families affected by domestic poisoning and other forms of hidden abuse. The foundation offers medical testing, legal support, and counseling services for survivors while also funding research into better detection and treatment methods. Every family deserves the chance to grow and thrive without interference from people who prioritize money over human life, reads the Foundation's mission statement. We exist to help survivors reclaim their health, their futures, and their right to make their own choices about family planning. Cordelia remains in prison, now serving her 8th year of a 25-year sentence. According to reports from the correctional facility, she has never expressed genuine remorse for her crimes and continues to maintain that her actions were justified and necessary for protecting the family's financial interests. Prison officials have noted that she demonstrates classic signs of narcissistic personality disorder, including an inability to accept responsibility for her actions and a persistent belief that she is the victim of an unfair system rather than a perpetrator of serious crimes. She still talks about the family inheritance as if she'll be released in time to resume managing it, one correctional counselor told us during a victim impact assessment. She doesn't seem to understand that her actions have permanently severed her connection to the family and that her financial control is gone forever. The reports also indicate that Cordelia has attempted to recruit other inmates to help her continue monitoring our family's activities and financial decisions. These efforts have been unsuccessful and have resulted in additional disciplinary measures that have extended her period of isolation from other prisoners. She's exactly where she needs to be, Detective Marsh observed when we received the latest prison report. She's demonstrated repeatedly that she's incapable of respecting boundaries or accepting that other people have the right to make their own choices. Prison is the only environment that can contain someone with her level of manipulative determination. As I write this story, I'm sitting in the nursery we've prepared for Henry, watching Luna play with her dollhouse while my unborn son moves actively in my womb. The room is filled with afternoon sunlight, children's laughter, and the peaceful energy of a family that has survived terrible trauma and emerged stronger. This is what Cordelia tried to prevent. This scene, a mother and daughter preparing to welcome a new family member, a home filled with love and anticipation for the future, represents everything she was willing to commit crimes to destroy. But we built it anyway. Despite her systematic poisoning, her elaborate planning, her calculated attempts to destroy my reproductive health, we created the family we dreamed of. We proved that love and determination are stronger than greed and manipulation. Mama, when Henry comes, will we have even more family dinners? Luna asked, arranging tiny furniture in her dollhouse. Yes, sweetheart, I replied, my hand resting on my growing belly. We'll have lots of family dinners where everyone is safe and loved and fed food that makes them healthy and strong. She nodded solemnly, then added, and no one will put bad things in the food because that's not how families work. That's exactly right, I said, marveling at her instinctive understanding of what healthy families should be. In our family, food is always about love and nourishment, never about hurting people. The victory isn't just that we survived Cordelia's poisoning, it's that we used the experience to build something better than what existed before. Our family is more intentional, more aware, and more committed to genuine care than it ever would have been without surviving her betrayal. Cordelia thought she was protecting her son's inheritance, but she actually gave us something far more valuable, the knowledge that our love for each other is strong enough to overcome any obstacle, and the wisdom to recognize and reject any attempt to disguise abuse as care. The experience of being systematically poisoned by my mother-in-law taught me that evil often wears a familiar face and speaks in the language of love and protection. The most dangerous people in our lives are often those who claim to care about us while working to destroy what we value most. But it also taught me that truth is powerful, that scientific evidence can expose even the most sophisticated lies, and that refusing to accept victimization can transform trauma into strength and wisdom. If you're experiencing unexplained health problems, especially if they seem to correlate with specific people or situations, trust your instincts and seek professional help. Document your symptoms, ask questions about unusual food or drink offerings, and never let anyone convince you that your health concerns are all in your head. Family traditions should bring joy and connection, not mysterious illness. Financial security should support family growth, not prevent it. And anyone who tries to make medical decisions about your body without your knowledge or consent, regardless of their claimed motivations, is committing a crime that deserves the full force of legal consequences. Most importantly, remember that surviving abuse isn't just about escaping harm, it's about reclaiming your right to build the life you want. Every healthy choice, every boundary you set, every moment of joy you create is a victory against those who tried to control and diminish you. Cordelia Blackthorne tried to steal my future, but she ended up giving me something she never intended. The absolute certainty that the family Jasper and I are building together is worth fighting for, worth protecting, and worth celebrating every single day. Have you ever experienced unexplained health problems that seem to correlate with specific family gatherings or social situations? Have you noticed family members who seem overly controlling about what you eat or drink? Trust your instincts, they might just save your life and your future. Remember that the most dangerous abuse often hides behind claims of love and protection. Anyone who makes decisions about your health, your body, or your reproductive choices without your knowledge and consent is not acting out of love, regardless of what they claim. If you enjoyed this story of survival and justice, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more shocking family revenge stories. Your support means everything to me as we explore the triumph of truth over manipulation, and the power of love to overcome even the most calculated evil.